Chapter 1: The Wrong Princess. Damon's POV. The palace loomed like a page torn from a fantasy book. Marble towers kissed by clouds, gilded gates wide open to welcome the billionaire groom. The air reeked of fresh roses and arrogance. I stepped out of the Rolls-Royce, buttoning the front of my Armani suit, trying not to sneer at the grand spectacle of fake smiles and inherited wealth. Flashbulbs flared in the distance, the media kept back by guards in ceremonial armor. Rose, the crown jewel of the kingdom, was nowhere in sight, and for a moment I could breathe. The deal had been inked months ago. I, Damon Crosse, son of American steel, would marry Princess Rose, daughter of Catherine, the queen consort of Aurelia, sealing a merger between old royalty and new money. A tidy transaction. But God help me, I had zero interest in being anyone's prize. "Mr. Crosse, this way, please," said a voice as soft as wind chimes. I turned, and time, as cliché as it sounds, halted. She wasn't wearing a tiara, no jewels clung to her neck. Just a plain, navy blue dress that brushed her ankles and a silver tray balanced in her steady hands. A servant, clearly. But there was something in her, something startling. Her posture was regal, defiant even, despite the bruise I spotted beneath her left sleeve. Her skin gleamed like golden brown silk under the sun. Her eyes, they weren't just sad, they were stormy, harboring secrets, soaked in grief. That look people wear when they've learned to bleed in silence. "I'll escort you to the East Wing," she added, lowering her gaze like protocol demanded. "What's your name?" I asked before I could stop myself. She stiffened. "Amber. Amber Courte." Amber, like the gem trapped in time. And suddenly the princess waiting upstairs didn't matter. As we walked through the echoing corridors of the palace, she didn't speak again, but I studied the way her fingers curled around the tray, the stiffness in her stride. She wasn't walking beside me. She was walking through ghosts. When we arrived at my suite, she placed the tray on a marble table. Teacups, little cakes, a diplomatic welcome. Then she turned to leave, but paused. "You shouldn't trust everyone here, Mr. Crosse." Her voice was low, like a whisper stolen by the wind. I stepped closer. Too close. "Why's that?" She hesitated, then said, "Because not everything in this palace is what it seems." And then she was gone. I stood there for a moment, staring at the door she'd vanished behind, her warning still clinging to the air. Later that evening, the official dinner was held in a chandelier-strewn hall that looked like Versailles had vomited gold all over it. At the head of the table sat Catherine, the queen consort, with a frozen smile and eyes sharper than razors. On her right, Rose, clad in a sparkling gown designed to impress, but unable to conceal the fact that she was bored out of her mind. She giggled too loud, spoke over everyone, and batted her lashes like it was a national sport. Across from her, I offered a tight-lipped smile and tried not to drown in disinterest. "Darling Damon," Rose purred, placing a manicured hand over mine, "I hope the suite is to your liking. Mummy made sure it was done in blue. Your favorite, yes?" I had never told her that. "Lovely," I replied, smoothly withdrawing my hand to reach for my wine. My gaze drifted down the line of servants along the wall, and found her again. Amber. She was dressed identically to the others, but none of them had the gravity she did. She wasn't pretending. She wasn't trying. She was just present. And yet she was more royal than the brat beside me. Her eyes met mine for a heartbeat. And then she looked away. Later that night, unable to sleep, I wandered down the corridors, following the eerie silence that cloaked the East Wing. The grandeur of the palace had faded under moonlight, replaced by shadows and whispers. I passed locked doors, cold statues, walls that could speak if I listened hard enough. That's when I heard it. Soft crying. Muffled. Gutted. It was coming from behind a carved wooden door slightly ajar. I pushed it gently. There, sitting on the floor with her head buried in her knees, was Amber. The tray she'd been carrying earlier lay shattered beside her, tea soaking into the rug like blood. Her back heaved with quiet sobs. I stood frozen, watching, wanting to walk away, knowing I wouldn't. "Amber?" My voice was low, careful. She jolted, scrambling up. "I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone would." "You're shaking," I said, stepping inside. "I'll clean this, I swear. Please don't tell the queen." Queen, not mother. Just that told me everything. "Who did this?" I asked, jaw tight. She wiped her eyes furiously. "It doesn't matter." "The hell it doesn't." She looked at me then, and something raw flickered in her expression, a mix of defiance and hopelessness, the look of someone who'd forgotten how to ask for help. "I'm just a servant, Mr. Crosse," she said quietly. "Nothing more." And that, right there, was the biggest lie of all. I knew in that moment, with a certainty I couldn't explain, she was everything.
Chapter 2, The Forgotten Princess, Amber's POV. The teacup slipped from my fingers before I even realized my hands were trembling. Porcelain shattered against the floor, shards glinting like broken stars beneath the chandelier. I didn't cry out, didn't flinch. I'd been trained not to react. Trained to absorb pain, to blend into walls, to never speak unless spoken to. But this time, the tears came without warning. I sank to the carpet, pressing my palms to the soaked rug, shame crawling up my throat like bile. Damon Crosse had seen me. Really seen me. That was dangerous. Useless girl, Catherine had hissed earlier, just before the dinner. Serve him with your eyes down, mouth shut, and if you spill anything tonight, I swear. Her threats didn't need finishing. They never did. My body remembered the bruises her words left, even when her hands didn't. I curled in on myself. Silent sobs racking my chest. The tray lay dented beside me, broken pieces a mirror to my life, scattered, sharp, forgotten. And then his voice. Amber? I shot up like I'd been burned. He stood at the door, framed in shadows and moonlight. Tall, sharp-suited, disheveled hair like he'd been pacing. The scent of expensive cologne and something wild surrounded him, a storm in a man's body. I panicked. I'm sorry, I didn't know anyone would. You're shaking. I backed away instinctively, trying to gather the mess at my feet. I'll clean this. Please, please don't tell the queen. His voice dropped to something steel-edged. Who did this? My breath caught. No one had asked that in years. Not and meant it. It doesn't matter, I whispered. His jaw tensed. The hell it doesn't. I looked at him then, really looked, and I saw something in his eyes that knocked the air from my lungs. Fury, but not aimed at me. And something else too. Unspoken. Undeniable. I'm just a servant, Mr. Crosse, I said, desperate to push that moment back into its box. Nothing more. His eyes darkened, but he didn't argue. Instead, he knelt slowly before me, on his knees, like I was the crown and not the dust beneath it. He picked up a sharp piece of porcelain, his fingers grazing mine. I jerked my hand away, heat surging up my arm. He noticed. He didn't comment. Servants don't tremble like that, he murmured. Servants don't hide bruises under silk sleeves. I stood abruptly. I should go. He didn't stop me, but his eyes followed me all the way down the corridor. Burning. Back in my quarters, little more than a glorified closet tucked behind the East Wing's linen room, I collapsed onto the cot and tried to forget his voice. His scent, his gentleness, I couldn't. Worse, I didn't want to, and that was a problem. Because wanting Damon Crosse was a betrayal of my silence, of my survival, of the ghost of my father. Sometimes I dream of him. Not the version they showed on the news, the fallen king of Aurelia who supposedly drank himself into an early grave, but the father I remembered. With hands that smelled like ink and leather, who read me poetry in 2 languages, who called me Luz della mia anima, light of my soul. And then came Catherine. She arrived like a summer storm, beautiful, loud, dripping with wealth. I was 8 when he married her, 10 when she began locking me in the attic, 12 when he stopped visiting me altogether, 14 when he died. They told the world he collapsed at a banquet. But I knew the truth. He never made it to the banquet. He died in his chambers, and no one let me see the body. Tonight, something changed. Damon Crosse's arrival had stirred still waters. I'd seen it in Catherine's smile, stretched too tight, in Rose's vanity. In the guards that suddenly lined the corridors near the West Tower, the one no one was allowed to enter. That tower once belonged to my father. I got out of bed. If I didn't act now, I never would. The palace library was dead silent. Most servants were banned from this section after dusk, but I'd found a key years ago, hidden inside one of Father's hollowed-out books in the attic. I'd kept it like a talisman. Slipping through the door, I lit a small brass lamp and moved past rows of velvet-bound volumes. I knew what I was looking for. The journals. My father's. He kept them in a concealed section behind the tapestries. I had memorized the path when I was small, watching him write at his desk, begging for stories before bed. The journals were still there, buried in a locked drawer beneath the ancient globe. I cracked it open and pulled one free. Dust plumed into the air, stinging my eyes. The leather was cracked, but the ink inside was pristine. My father's handwriting, elegant and precise, spilled across the page. October 3rd. She frightens me. Her questions never end. She watches me sleep. I fear I've made a mistake. Amber must be protected at all costs. Just, if anything happens to me... The entry stopped. Torn out. I flipped through the rest, heart pounding. Dozens of pages were missing. I sank into the reading chair, clutching the book to my chest. He knew. He knew something would happen. My fingers dug into the leather cover, numbness creeping into my limbs. This wasn't just about royalty anymore. This was murder. And someone was making sure the truth never surfaced. I had no idea if I could trust Damon Crosse. No idea if he was genuine or just another player in Catherine's game. But tonight, when he looked at me like I mattered, I believed him. I wanted to believe him. And maybe, just maybe, he was the only one who could help me unravel the truth. From the corridor beyond the library, a floorboard creaked. My blood iced over. Someone was outside. I stuffed the journal back into the drawer and snuffed the lamp just as the doorknob rattled. Frozen, I held my breath. And then, silence. The person had left, but I knew that the danger was far from over.
Chapter 3. Thorns Beneath Roses. By day 3, I was already exhausted. From Rose's incessant chatter. From her cloying perfume that lingered on every silk pillow she forced into my suite. From the sound of her heels as she paraded up and down the corridors like she was walking a damn runway. She had beauty. That much was undeniable, but beauty fades quickly when it's hollow. During breakfast, she spent 15 minutes debating whether her egg yolks were too yellow. At lunch, she snapped at the chef because her risotto wasn't spiritual enough. And every time she spoke about the wedding, she said, "my dress, my photos, and my followers." Never once our future. Never me. I sat beside her, nodding on cue, swirling my wine slowly, feeling like a guest at my own engagement. And all the while, my eyes wandered. To her, Amber. She moved like mist through the palace, quiet, efficient, unnoticed by most. But not by me. Never by me. I could feel when she entered a room, even if I couldn't see her. Like gravity shifted to pull my attention toward her. Every time I glanced up, she was already looking away. But once, just once, our eyes met for longer than a breath. And I swear it did something permanent to my pulse. I found her again in the garden later that afternoon. She was alone, pruning the roses with a soft gloved hand and a pair of dulled shears. The garden was deserted. No watchful eyes or fluttering fans. Just her, knee-deep in thorns. And yet she looked more royal than the entire palace combined. I stepped down from the gravel path, my shoes crunching softly beneath me. She didn't turn. "Don't they have gardeners for that?" I asked. Her shears paused. "They do, but I find it soothing." "Even with the thorns?" She finally turned her head. Her lips were pink from the cold, her eyes tired but guarded. "Especially with the thorns, they remind me of where I am." I studied her. The sunlight through the leaves kissed her skin, casting delicate shadows across her cheekbones. "You don't belong here," I said quietly. She tilted her head. "Because I'm not wearing a crown?" "No," I murmured, stepping closer. "Because you're too good for this place." She laughed, soft and bitter. "You don't know me. I know enough. I'm a servant, Mr. Crosse. You say that like it defines you." She blinked, something flickering in her expression, a crack in the calm. "I've been in this palace longer than you can imagine," she said. "I know its corners, its secrets, its rot. You're just passing through." I stepped closer, drawn by something I couldn't name. "You think this is where I want to be?" She looked up at me then. Really looked. "What do you want, Damon?" My name on her lips was a whispered sin. I didn't answer. Not immediately. Instead, I watched the wind play with a curl that had escaped her braid. She was standing just inches away now, thorns forgotten, tension rising like heat off sun-warmed stone. "I want to know why you flinch when Catherine walks by," I said softly. "Why you always look like you're waiting to disappear." She took a shaky breath. Her walls shot back up. "You shouldn't ask questions like that." "Why not?" "Because this isn't your story." That hit like a slap, sharp and strangely intimate. But I didn't back down. I took another step, close enough now that I could smell her, jasmine and smoke and something earthy. "I'm not sure that's true anymore," I said. Her eyes widened. My hand lifted, unthinking, inevitable, reaching for her cheek. "Just a touch, just wahem." A sharp, sugary voice sliced through the air. I didn't need to turn to know who it was. Amber stepped back so fast I could almost hear the distance snap back into place. "Damon!" Rose practically sang, swaying toward us in a dress too tight and heels too high for the grass beneath her feet. "There you are. I've been looking everywhere for you." I turned, my throat dry. She looped her arm through mine with practiced ease and narrowed her eyes ever so slightly at Amber. "Oh," she said, smiling like a predator. "I didn't realize you were gardening." Amber bowed her head. "Your Highness." Rose didn't bother responding. She was already dragging me back toward the palace, chattering about some new socialite guest arriving tonight, but I glanced back once. Amber was still in the garden, pruning roses like nothing happened, except now her gloves were stained red.
Chapter 4. The Silence Between Us. Amber's POV. I didn't cut myself on the rose bush, not physically at least, but something inside me tore a little when I looked up and saw him standing in the garden, my garden, with his hand outstretched, eyes full of something I didn't have a name for. Something too soft, too dangerous. And then Rose appeared, all pearls and poison, and the spell broke. Of course it did, because that's what always happened. I was never allowed to live inside the softness, only to watch it pass by. I stayed out in the garden long after they'd gone, picking at the stems, trimming branches that didn't need trimming. Anything to avoid going back inside. Anything to let the wind dry the heat on my cheeks that wasn't from the sun. I hated him for looking at me like that, and I hated myself for wanting it to happen again. I didn't return to the servant quarters until evening, when the palace lights had shifted to gold and the smell of roasting meat carried from the kitchens. I was halfway through peeling off my gloves when Miriam, one of the older maids, appeared in the doorway. Her expression was unreadable. That alone made my stomach twist. "You've been requested." I paused. "By who?" "By the queen, to serve the prince-to-be privately in his suite tonight." My hands went cold. "That's Rose's job," I said too quickly. "She says it's a test, to see if you can handle the honor." I could hear the venom behind the words, even if Miriam kept her tone polite. Everyone knew Rose didn't share. Not her perfume, not her wine, certainly not her future husband. This was no test. This was a warning. The clock had barely struck 8 when I stood in front of his door, heart pounding beneath my uniform. I had changed into a cleaner dress, still plain, still regulation, but newer. No frayed seams, no loose buttons. I didn't know why I'd bothered. I hated how nervous I was. A servant shouldn't be nervous. A servant should be invisible. I knocked once. "Come in." His voice, low and clear, filtered through the heavy door like a melody I wasn't supposed to hear. I pushed it open, careful not to betray the tremor in my hands. The room was lit by the fire, not the overhead chandelier. Shadows danced across the walls, and the scent of bourbon lingered in the air, warm and inviting. He sat by the window, half turned toward the garden, the collar of his shirt loosened, tie discarded. He looked tired, not the kind of tired that sleep could fix. He didn't smile when he saw me, but he looked relieved. "I didn't think you'd come." "I didn't have a choice," I said, keeping my voice neutral. His jaw clenched. "They're using you." "They've always used me." I moved to the table and set down the silver tray. He hadn't asked for anything in particular, so the kitchen had sent up roasted lamb, wine, and those little honey pastries Rose liked to pretend she didn't eat. "You're not like them," he said after a pause. I kept my eyes on the silverware. "No, I'm not royalty." "That's not what I meant." I turned to face him. "Then what do you mean, Mr. Crosse?" He stood, slow and deliberate, and walked toward me until we were a breath apart. There was too much silence between us, thick and weighted and full of things that couldn't be said. "You look at me like I'm a man," he said. "Not a title. Not a bank account. I'm not sure you'd like what I see." "Try me." I exhaled, sharp and bitter. "I see a man trapped in gold, chains, and silk curtains, pretending he wants the life laid out for him." He didn't flinch. Instead, he said, "That's the closest anyone's come to seeing me in years." I didn't want to feel sorry for him. I didn't want to admire him. But I did. Because unlike the rest of them, Damon felt. He noticed things. He noticed me. "Why are you doing this?" I asked. "You're marrying Rose. You've already won. What more could you want?" His voice dropped to a whisper. "You." The word hung between us like smoke. For a heartbeat, I couldn't breathe. My knees wanted to give out, but I held myself upright, spine straight. I couldn't let him see how deeply that one word cut through me. You shouldn't say that. But it's true. I took a step back. You're engaged. I didn't choose her. Neither did I. His brows knit together. I regretted it the moment I said it. But it was the truth, wasn't it? I didn't choose to be here. I didn't choose to scrub her dresses or stand behind her throne. I didn't choose for my bloodline to be buried under lies. You deserve better, he said quietly. No one ever taught me what I deserve, I whispered. He reached for me then. And this time, I didn't move. His hand hovered over my cheek, not touching, just there. My skin buzzed beneath the distance. My heart pounded against my ribs, screaming that this was wrong, this was foolish, this was dangerous, but still, I wanted him to close that gap. His eyes dropped to my lips. And just as his fingers brushed against my jaw, the door slammed open. I jerked away like I'd been burned. Rose stood in the doorway in a blood-red dress, framed by firelight. Her smile didn't reach her eyes. "Oh," she said. "Hope I'm not interrupting." Her gaze flicked between us. Cold. Calculating. I stepped back, lowering my head, heart hammering in my ears. Damon didn't say a word, and that silence said everything.
Chapter 5, Almost Yours. Dinner arrived under a silver dome in the pretense of protocol. But nothing about tonight was formal. The Queen had arranged it, so she said, a private dinner in my suite. No Rose, no press. Just me and a personal attendant. Amber. It was a trap, obviously. But if it was a game, I was already too far gone to stop playing. She entered quietly, head down, but I felt her before I saw her. The room seemed to inhale when she stepped inside, and I swear I forgot how to breathe altogether. She wore the same uniform as always, navy dress, plain collar, nothing showy, but it clung to her frame in a way I hadn't noticed before. Or maybe I had and had forced myself not to. Her hair was pulled back in that tight braid she always wore, but a few curls framed her face now, softening her edges. Her eyes found mine for the briefest moment. A flicker, a warning. She knew we were being watched. I dismissed the footman with a wave and locked the door behind them. That got her attention. "Relax," I said. "We're not doing anything wrong." "You keep saying that," she replied, moving to the table. "One day it won't be true." She removed the dome and began serving the meal. Roasted duck, truffle potatoes, a Bordeaux older than either of us had any right to enjoy. I wasn't hungry. Not for food, anyway. "Sit with me." She paused, a silver fork in hand. "I'm not supposed to. I'm asking, not ordering." She stared at the empty chair across from mine for a long moment, then slowly she lowered herself into it. The candlelight caught her cheekbones just right, her skin glowed. And her eyes, God, her eyes, held the kind of depth most people spend lifetimes drowning in. We ate in silence at first. She picked at her food like it might turn on her. I drank more wine than I usually would, not to dull the tension, just to survive it. "I dreamt about you last night," I said softly, watching her over the rim of my glass. Her fork froze midair. "In the dream, you weren't wearing a uniform," I added. "You were wearing a crown." A bitter smile tugged at her lips. "Must have been a nightmare for someone." "Not for me." She looked up then, and for a second, I saw the girl beneath the servant, proud, wounded, regal. "You don't know what you're playing with," she said. "Then teach me." She exhaled, setting her fork down. "Do you really want to know who I am, Damon? Or do you just like the idea of a forbidden girl with a tragic past?" "I want you. Not the story. Not the status. You." Her throat bobbed. She stood abruptly, stepping away from the table toward the fireplace. The flames licked at the shadows cast along the stone, and I followed her without thinking. "I read what your father wrote," she said, barely above a whisper. He knew. He knew something wasn't right. He feared Catherine, and he was right to. I moved closer. "You think she killed him?" "I know she did, but no one believes me. No one ever did. I believe you." That stopped her cold. I reached for her, slowly, carefully, and brushed her braid behind her shoulder. My fingers grazed the side of her neck, and her breath hitched. She didn't pull away. "I shouldn't want this," she said, her voice cracking. "But you do," I whispered, stepping even closer. "Don't lie to me, not with your eyes begging me to close this space." She looked up, and I swore her eyes were glass, shining, fragile, holding back an entire flood she hadn't let anyone see. "Say it," I murmured. "Say you feel this too." Her lips parted. But before the words could come, crack. Glass exploded. A bullet shattered the window beside us, shards raining down like frozen rain. I grabbed her and yanked her to the floor, covering her body with mine as another shot ripped through the air. "Stay down!" I barked, drawing the pistol I kept hidden in the drawer beside the bar. My heart thundered as I scanned the shadows outside. Another crack, this time into the far wall. Amber curled against me, trembling, clutching my jacket like a lifeline. The room was chaos, broken glass, overturned chairs, firelight flickering wildly. Whoever fired the shots wasn't aiming to kill randomly. They were aiming at me, or worse, her. The guards banged on the door seconds later. I shouted for them to enter. They swept the room, radios crackling, but whoever it was had vanished into the night. Amber sat up slowly, face pale. A small cut on her temple trickled blood down her cheek. I took her face in my hands. "Are you hurt?" "Just shaken," she whispered. I looked into her eyes, felt the raw terror in her bones. Someone wanted her silenced. Someone knew what she was uncovering, and if they were willing to shoot through my window to do it. This wasn't just palace intrigue anymore. This was war. I tightened my grip on her. "From now on," I said, voice firm, "you don't leave my side." Her lips parted, but this time she didn't argue. She just nodded, and I knew, with terrifying clarity, I would kill for this girl.
Chapter 6, Shadows Don't Lie. The blood dried before the panic did. I'd washed the cut on my forehead 3 times, but I still felt the sting. Felt it more in my chest than on my skin. The window glass had been cleaned, the bullet lodged into the plaster removed, the servants instructed to keep quiet. But no one had to tell me to stay silent. I'd lived in silence for most of my life. What scared me now was how loud the truth had become. Someone tried to kill us, and I knew. Deep in the marrow of my bones, it hadn't been a warning shot. They weren't trying to scare me. They were trying to erase me. Because I knew something, or rather, I was starting to remember what I'd always been forced to forget. The morning after the shooting, I wasn't permitted to serve Rose. Catherine's order. No explanation. I wasn't surprised, but I did notice that neither of them had come to check on me. Damon had, though. He hadn't left my side that night. Not until the doctor had stitched my temple and security had swept the entire palace wing. When he finally left me just before sunrise, I could still feel the weight of his body on top of mine. Not in fear, in protection, in something else. Something that scared me more than the bullets. By noon, I was in the oldest part of the palace, the West Wing Library. It smelled of dust and worn leather and neglect. No one came here anymore, not unless they were hiding or searching. The room was massive, stretching 2 stories high with spiral staircases on either side. I moved between rows of ancient books and brittle parchment, careful not to draw attention from the few older scholars who still worked here, cataloging forgotten royal archives. I was looking for a specific volume. My father's journals. Not the curated ones in the East Hall with polished covers and state-edited pages. The real ones. The ones he'd written late at night, after Catherine had moved in and Rose had started calling him Papa with sugar on her tongue. I knew they existed. I remembered him scribbling in them during storms, his brows furrowed, eyes red. "One day you'll read these, Petal. They'll tell you everything." He never got the chance to show me where he kept them, but I had an idea. There was a secret drawer built into his favorite reading chair, an armchair covered in green velvet near the arched window. It was still here, untouched. I dropped to my knees beside it, heart pounding, pressed the notch just under the left armrest. Nothing. I tried again. Still nothing. Panic rose in my throat. Maybe Catherine had found it. Maybe, click. It opened. Inside, a leather-bound journal, cracked along the spine. My throat dried. I flipped to the last page. "If you find this, Amber, it means they've done what I feared. I hope it's not too late. Catherine is not who she claims to be. I have reason to believe she's poisoned me slowly. Arsenic. My health declines by the day. I dare not eat what she serves anymore. I've contacted my lawyer in Italy, Enzo Rossi. He's safeguarding the original will, one that names you, my blood, as rightful heir. But they won't let it surface. I'm afraid they'll do anything to stop it, even murder." My hands shook violently. The journal slipped from my grip, thudding onto the floor. The sound echoed louder than it should have. I grabbed it, hugged it to my chest, and bolted. I didn't see the shadow following me until I was nearly back at the servant corridor. He stepped out of the dark hallway. A man, mid-40s, expensive watch, a scar down the left side of his face. "Miss Courte," he said coolly. "Lovely day for reading." I clutched the book tighter. "I don't know who you are." "That's unfortunate, so that because I know you." He smiled without warmth. "And I know what you're holding." My blood turned to ice. "I think you should come with me." No, the word surprised even me. I didn't sound like a servant. I sounded like someone with fire in her blood. He took a step closer. I turned and ran. Skirt flying, shoes slipping against the polished floors, heart galloping. I didn't stop until I reached the grand staircase and collided with a body far more familiar. Damon. He caught me instantly, arms gripping my waist, concern etching across his features. "Amber, what the hell?" "I need to talk to you," I gasped. "Privately." I didn't look back, but I felt the scarred man watching. And I knew, whatever secrets I'd uncovered, I wasn't the only one chasing them anymore.
Chapter 7, Fire Beneath the Crown. The leather journal was heavy in my hands, not by weight, but by what it held. Amber sat across from me, curled into the corner of the sofa in my private study. Her knees were drawn up, the cut on her temple still pink beneath the butterfly bandage. Her eyes never left mine. I'd seen her scared before, but this wasn't fear. This was fury she didn't yet know how to wield. "Start at the beginning," I said, and she did. Everything. The hidden drawer, the journal, the man with the scar, and the line she'd read over and over in her head on the run to my room. "She's poisoning me. There is a will. Amber is the heir." I opened the journal, letting my fingers trail over the scrawled handwriting. It was shaky, ink blotched in places. The final entries descended into barely legible slashes across the page, like he'd been in agony when writing them. The king had known, and no one believed him. No one wanted to. "I want to kill her," I said, my voice low, quiet, calm. Amber's head jerked up. "What?" "I mean it." My thumb pressed into the spine of the book. "Your stepmother, Catherine. I've dealt with predators in boardrooms and back alleys, but this, she plays on a different board. Poison, lies, stolen crowns, and she dared to try to kill you." "I don't know if the shot was for me," she whispered. "Maybe you were the threat." "No. She wants me, or rather she wants Rose to have me." I looked up. "But you're the one person in this palace who could burn everything down." Her breath caught, and I saw it again, the flash of fire beneath all her trembling. Not a maid, not a servant. Royalty. "I want to help you take it back," I said. "Your name, your story, your crown." A beat passed. Then she whispered, "Why?" I set the journal aside and stood, walked to her, kneeling in front of the sofa, close enough to touch, close enough to feel. "Because I can't stop thinking about you," I said. "Damon." "No. Let me say this." My voice was hoarse. "Every moment I've spent with you, I've felt like a man living two lives. One with Rose, the crown, the cameras, the cold obligation, and one with you. Quiet. Real. Terrifying in a way I didn't know I could feel again." She looked down, but I gently took her hand. "I know I shouldn't want you, but I do. Not because you're forbidden, but because when I look at you, I don't see what I'm running from. I see what I want to run toward." She blinked hard. Then, slowly, she leaned in. Her breath fanned across my cheek. Her lips hovered inches from mine. I could smell her skin, lavender and old books, and I was so close to forgetting the world, but her hand pulled away at the last second. "I can't," she whispered. "Not until we make it right." My chest tightened. "Then let me help you." She nodded once. "Then we start with Enzo Rossi, the lawyer my father trusted." I stood, immediately alert. "Do you know where he is?" "He lives in Florence, but he hasn't responded to any contact in years. He went dark after my father's funeral." "I'll find him," I said. "I'll take the jet." "Damon." "Shh." I brushed a curl behind her ear. "We do this together." But even as I promised her that, I knew what I had to do next. Alone. I had to face Catherine. She was waiting for me in the solarium, draped in a violet silk robe, sipping her tea like the empress she pretended to be. "Damon," she greeted smoothly. "I heard there was a disturbance last night. How tragic. Did Amber faint again? Poor girl seems terribly fragile." I smiled. "Deadly. Bullet holes tend to shake people." Her cup paused midair. "I suppose I should be grateful no one was hurt," she said finally. "I wonder," I murmured, stepping closer. If you'd have felt differently had Amber been the one bleeding on your carpets. Her expression hardened just slightly. The first crack in her porcelain. She's quite the distraction, isn't she? And Rose is quite the spectacle. Silence stretched between us like drawn wire. I read the late king's personal journal, I said. He was afraid of you. Paranoia runs in power, Damon. You of all people should know that. He suspected arsenic. She stood slowly, tea forgotten. And what would you do with such suspicions? Depends, I said, voice low, on how far you're willing to go to keep your stolen legacy. Her smile was a snake's kiss. Don't overestimate your safety, she said, stepping past me. You're only useful until you aren't. And so is she. I didn't move as she walked away. But I knew one thing for certain. This wasn't just about forbidden love anymore. It was war for a kingdom neither of us had asked for, but one Amber was born to rule. And I'd burn every palace to the ground before I let anyone steal that from her again.
Chapter 8, Paper Crowns, Burn 2. The first lesson in reclaiming power was knowing how to hold your chin higher than your trembling heart. I stood in front of the mirror, the one buried in the linen closet beneath the East Wing stairs. I'd spent my entire life avoiding reflections. Now I studied this one like my life depended on it. Because it did. Hair twisted up neatly, posture straight, chin lifted, eyes like fire. But I still looked like a servant pretending to be a queen. I hated that. My father's blood ran through my veins. I'd once sat on his lap during royal ceremonies, curled into the crook of his arm as he addressed nobles with thunder in his voice and a tenderness he saved only for me. Petal, he used to call me. Now I was thorned, and I would bleed if it meant getting everything back. Damon had kept his word. Within 24 hours, his private investigator had already tracked down Enzo Rossi's last known location in Florence. We were planning the trip carefully, quietly, but I knew we didn't have much time because Catherine was watching, and Rose, spoiled, sugar-frosted Rose, had started acting differently. The way she looked at me now wasn't with disdain, it was suspicion. I was on my way to the kitchen that evening when I passed by the royal music chamber, one of those rooms no one actually used, but everyone pretended to care about during press tours. The light was on, the door ajar. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop. But then I heard my name, and I froze. Amber is becoming a problem, Catherine said. Her voice was clipped, cold. She's always been a problem, Rose replied, petulant and sharp. She was supposed to scrub floors and stay out of sight, not seduce my fiancé. She hasn't seduced anyone. If anything, Damon's the one slipping. Catherine's heels clicked against marble. But I warned you, didn't I? Your father's mistake would come back to haunt us. I told him not to adopt her. My blood iced. Adopt. She was more than a mistake, Rose hissed. She's a stain. She's the rightful heir if that blasted will ever surfaces. And with Damon sniffing around, we can't afford to play nice. So what do we do? Rose asked. There was a long pause. Then Catherine's voice dropped into something terrifyingly soft. We remind her of her place. And if she forgets again, we'll finish what we started the night her father died. My hand flew to my mouth. I stepped backward. A creak. The wood betrayed me. Sudden silence from inside the room. Then footsteps. Fast. Purposeful. I turned and ran. My lungs burned by the time I reached Damon's quarters. I didn't knock, just burst through the door like a storm, eyes wide, journal clutched against my chest. He was seated at his desk, sleeves rolled up, jaw tight. His expression changed the second he saw me. Amber? They killed him, I choked. They really did it, and they're planning to kill me next. He crossed the room in 3 strides, arms coming around me as my knees finally gave out. It's happening again, I whispered. They're not going to let me survive this time. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then, they won't touch you. I'll make sure of it. But they're watching me. Then they'll watch you rise. I pulled back, eyes glistening. I can't do this alone. You're not alone anymore. His hands cradled my face, thumbs brushing the panic from my cheeks. We'll go to Florence. We'll find Enzo, and when we come back, we'll bring hell with us. But, he leaned closer, I've let too many things go unspoken. Damon, I want you. 3 words, a confession and a warning and a promise. I want you even if it ruins me. My heart thudded painfully. "And I want you," I whispered. He kissed me then, not like in the stories, but like a man desperate to make something sacred before it's taken. Outside the door, a figure slipped away from the shadows, rage curling at her lips like smoke. Rose had followed me, and now she knew.
Chapter 9. The Lawyer in the Shadows, Damon's POV. Florence was quieter than usual, the kind of quiet that made your gut tighten even in broad daylight. I hadn't been here in over 5 years, and even now, the amber-lit alleys and crumbling Renaissance facades couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I stepped out of the jet with Amber cloaked in one of my coats. She hadn't said much since we boarded. Her eyes stayed locked on the horizon, the set of her jaw hard enough to split marble. She wasn't the same girl I met weeks ago. She was burning now, controlled, quiet, a storm with a crown, and I was utterly hers. The car pulled up within minutes, discreet, black, unmarked, the kind of vehicle I used when I wanted to disappear into the world without being seen. Villa Rossi, I told the driver, via dei servi. Amber turned to me. How do you know the address? I've had a file on Enzo since yesterday. I hesitated. I wanted to be sure we weren't walking into another trap. She nodded, fingers twisting in her lap. We didn't speak for the rest of the drive. The villa looked abandoned. Iron gates clung with vines. The shutters on the second floor were drawn, and the fountain in the courtyard had long since dried into dust. We stepped out into a warm, muggy breeze as a thundercloud hovered somewhere beyond the Arno River. I don't like this, Amber whispered. Stay behind me. I led her through the rusted gate, boots crunching against the gravel. The front door was ajar. That was the first bad sign. The second came the moment I stepped inside, and the scent hit me. Copper. Blood. Amber. Outside. Now. But she followed me in anyway. The living room was a mess. Papers everywhere. Furniture overturned. Books ripped open and scattered. On the wall, scrawled in thick crimson letters, "You're too late." Amber gasped behind me, and then we saw him. Enzo Rossi, slumped across his desk, eyes wide open. Dead. The police arrived 30 minutes later, thanks to the anonymous call I made from a burner phone left behind in the villa's kitchen. I didn't trust the Italian press, not with Amber's identity at stake, but Enzo's death had to be documented. The moment we got back into the car, Amber crumbled. It's my fault, she whispered. He was trying to protect me. I reached for her hand. No, it's theirs, Catherine's, Rose's, whoever else is helping cover up this twisted legacy. Her fingers clutched mine, trembling. What now? She asked. We go deeper. But Enzo's dead. Yes, but his files aren't. I pulled out a flash drive from my jacket pocket. I grabbed it from the hidden drawer beneath his desk. Password protected, but my tech team will crack it. Amber stared at me like she was seeing something new, or something terrifying. You planned for this, she said. I planned for everything, I said quietly. You're not just helping me, are you? I didn't answer right away. Amber, I finally said, voice hoarse, I'd burn the world to keep you alive. So that silence between us stretched like a rubber band pulled too tight, and then she leaned in, fingers on my jaw, soft against the sharp edges. She kissed me, and this time, she didn't pull away. Not when her hand curled into my shirt, not when I slid my palm against the curve of her back, not even when we both remembered how dangerous this was. Because in that moment, we weren't a billionaire and a bastard heir. We were just two broken people trying to survive the fire. That night, as we lay in the hotel suite overlooking the Florentine skyline, I watched her sleep beside me, hair scattered like ink across the pillow. But peace didn't last long, because my burner phone buzzed on the table. One message. We know what you took. Come home before we make her disappear. I stared at the screen, blood icing in my veins. This wasn't just a warning. It was war, and now it was personal.
Chapter 10. Truth Cuts Sharper Than Knives. There are things you think you're ready to hear until they bury themselves in your chest and hollow you out. The file Damon's tech team cracked open wasn't very large, just one folder tucked into a directory marked Petal, my childhood nickname. I should have known. The hotel room was dark except for the blue glow of the laptop screen. Damon sat beside me on the bed, tense, unrateable. He hadn't spoken much since we got back from the villa. Neither had I. But now I wasn't sure silence would ever come again. The first document was a birth certificate. Amber Courte. Born, St. Lucien, Montreuil. Mother, Celeste Courte. Father, King Lucien IV. My father's name. No asterisks, no footnotes, no adopted by the royal household tags. I was legitimate. I knew it, I whispered, hand covering my mouth. Then I clicked the next file. An audio recording. The voice that filtered through the speakers was familiar in the way nightmares were. Soft, poised, manipulative. Catherine. Once the child is gone, we'll say it was illness. The people will mourn, but only briefly. I've arranged for the doctor to falsify the death report. Lucien won't know until it's too late. And what about the will? Another voice asked. It will be misplaced. I froze. Damon paused the audio. Amber, you don't have to keep listening. I do. There was no going back. Not now. I pressed play again. And the mother? The second voice asked. Catherine laughed, chilled and glassy. She's already dying. I just gave her a little help. I swallowed back bile. My mother. They killed her. They killed her and then planned to erase me like a stain. I couldn't breathe. I stood from the bed, pacing to the edge of the window, pressing my forehead against the cool glass. Below, Florence glittered in soft gold, timeless and unknowingly complicit in my pain. She murdered them, I whispered. She murdered them both. Damon rose slowly and came to stand beside me. His reflections stared back in the glass. She'll pay for it, he said. I swear. But the rage inside me wasn't clean. It wasn't noble. It was old and bitter and clawing for vengeance. I don't just want her to pay, I said. I want her to suffer. I want her to lose everything like I did. Damon's hand wrapped around mine. And you will. But we do it smart. No sudden moves. I turned to face him, finally seeing the fear behind his steel. They threatened you, I said. They threatened you. He corrected. I touched the side of his face, brushing my thumb along the edge of his jaw. You shouldn't be in this. I'm already in it. All the way in. Don't you get that yet? He leaned in. Foreheads touched, breath mingled. I don't want a throne, he murmured. I want you. His lips found mine with that same fierce devotion that always made my knees weak. But it wasn't just passion now. It was something desperate, something that clung in the space between life and war. We kissed like we were already bleeding. The next morning, I woke before dawn. The city was just beginning to stir outside. Vendors clattering crates, bells chiming softly from a distant tower. I slipped from bed and opened my journal. Not the one I used to survive. The other one, the one with my mother's name carved inside the cover. I flipped through old notes, hidden sketches, memories I'd locked away. Then something fell out. A photo. I picked it up, frowning. It was a younger version of my mother, Celeste. She stood beside a man, tall, handsome, dark hair, serious eyes, not my father. I turned the photo over. Paris, 1987. C&M. C&M. I grabbed my phone, heart beginning to race. I scanned the photo, uploaded it into the database Damon had given me access to. Facial recognition. One match. Marcello Varelli, current, Prime Minister of Montreuil. My stomach dropped. He wasn't just a politician. He was my uncle, and suddenly the motive was clear. Catherine didn't just want me gone to control the crown. She needed me dead because if I ever reconnected with Marcello, if I ever learned who I really was, her web would unravel completely. All roads lead back to the throne. The game had changed, and I wasn't a pawn anymore.
Chapter 11, The Serpent's Court, Damon's POV. The palace in Montreuil always reminded me of something ancient pretending to be alive, like a serpent that had shed its skin too many times and still slithered around, hungry for power. We arrived under the cover of early evening. Royal guards, dressed in crisp blue uniforms with silver epaulets, lined the steps. They didn't bow, they didn't smile, just stiff nods and hard eyes that followed every movement. Amber stood beside me in a deep charcoal dress that hugged her curves like shadow. Her hair was swept into an elegant twist at the nape of her neck, and her face bore no trace of fear, only fire. If Catherine thought we would sneak in like mice, she underestimated how lions move. "You're sure about this?" I murmured, hand hovering at the small of her back. Her voice was cold and clipped. "I'm not leaving until I sit on the throne she tried to bury me beneath." We stepped through the massive oak doors together. It felt like stepping into a war zone dressed in silk. The court was gathered, nobles, diplomats, royal guards. Rose stood at the top of the stairs in a floor-length rose gold gown that glittered like deception itself. She didn't blink, just offered a poisonous smile that barely reached her eyes. Damon, she purred, walking toward me like a cat stalking prey. You finally returned, and you brought... She tilted her head toward Amber. A servant. My fingers flexed at my side. I brought your future queen, I said, voice calm but edged with iron. Murmurs rose through the room. A few gasps. Catherine appeared next, descending the stairwell like royalty birthed from smoke. She was dressed in navy, every detail of her outfit calculated. Her smile was tighter than a drawstring noose. My, she said softly. Brave words for a man who's standing in my house. Amber stepped forward. It's not your house, and soon everyone here will know that. The tension snapped like a wire. One of the guards raised his hand, but I was faster, stepping in front of her. Touch her, and I'll paint these marble floors red, I growled. Catherine didn't flinch. Oh, darling, you think I'm afraid of you? No, but you should be afraid of truth, and we brought enough of it to sink this palace. At my signal, Victor, my right-hand man, entered from the side entrance with a briefcase. He handed it to Amber, who opened it without ceremony. Inside, a hard copy of the files from Enzo's drive. Birth certificate, audio recordings, the photo of her mother with Marcello Varelli. Amber stepped to the center of the court. I am Amber Courte, daughter of Queen Celeste and King Lucien IV, the rightful heir of Montreuil. A hush fell. Then Catherine laughed. It was brittle, sharp, like glass being stepped on. This is madness, she said, her voice trembling just slightly. She's a fraud, an orphan you filled with fantasies. No, said a voice from the back of the court. A figure stepped forward. Older, broad-shouldered, wearing a gray suit and a face carved by regret. Everything she said is true. Marcello Varelli, the Prime Minister. Gasps rang louder now. Amber swayed slightly beside me. I reached for her hand. She didn't let go. Marcello continued. Celeste was my sister. We thought her child died with her, but Catherine had already paid off the physicians. She faked the death, buried a child-sized coffin filled with sand. He looked at Amber. You look just like her. Catherine turned pale. Her composure cracked like porcelain dropped from a height. Even Rose stepped back, uncertain. I took a step toward her. End of the game. But Catherine's eyes sharpened. Oh, darling, this was never a game. And with that, the doors behind us slammed open. Dozens of guards stormed in, guns drawn, aimed at me. Amber gasped, spinning toward me. Rose's voice rang out from the dais. Damon Crosse, you are under arrest for conspiracy against the crown, attempted treason, and forging royal documents. I didn't move. I didn't even flinch. I turned to Amber and smiled softly, brushing her cheek with the back of my knuckles. Don't let them silence you, no matter what. Damon. The guards grabbed me, forced me to my knees, my arms wrenched behind my back. Amber screamed, struggling against a guard that held her. Damon! I didn't stop looking at her. Even as they dragged me toward the palace cells, even as the weight of betrayal bore down on my shoulders like chains, even as I whispered, just loud enough for her to hear, I would still choose you, every time for 12.
Chapter 12. Queens Don't Kneel. The door slammed shut behind Damon. That sound, it wasn't just metal hitting stone. It was betrayal echoing through my bones. I stood frozen in the court, surrounded by wolves dressed in velvet, their teeth hidden behind faux concern. Catherine was speaking. Something about treason, law, the sacred duty of the monarchy, but her voice felt like static in my ears. He was gone. And I hadn't even said I love you. Marcello's hand rested gently on my arm. We need to leave, now. I turned to him, eyes wild. They took him. They'll do worse if you stay. Come. I allowed him to lead me through the back halls of the palace, the same ones I used to sneak through to deliver linens and light candles. Now the air was thick with ghosts. My father's, my mother's, mine. In a quiet room tucked behind the royal library, Marcello locked the door and turned to face me. You understand now why Catherine couldn't let you live, he said, his voice grim. Your claim isn't just inconvenient, it's fatal to her. I don't care about a claim, I said, pacing. I care that she's going to kill Damon, that she used me to get to him. He knew the risks, Marcello replied softly, and he chose you anyway. I gripped the table until my knuckles went white. Then I'll choose him. No matter what. Marcello nodded. Then you need power. Now. Before Catherine controls the narrative. He pulled a leather-bound folder from his coat and handed it to me. The Council of Nobles, he explained. They have the authority to declare a new heir if they're convinced, if you rally them before Catherine tightens her grip. I opened the folder and scanned the names. I recognized a few from the court, stiff old men with polished smiles and questionable loyalty. This won't be easy, I whispered. No, but queens don't rise in easy times. That night, I slipped back into the palace in disguise, hood drawn, heartbeat loud in my ears. Marcello's contacts had arranged a meeting in the old chapel at midnight. I moved like a ghost through corridors I once polished on hands and knees. I passed a familiar painting, one of King Lucian, my father. My chest tightened. He looked so proud, so unaware of the poison sleeping beside him. Just before I reached the chapel, someone grabbed my arm and yanked me into the shadows. I gasped, fists ready, but the figure pressed a hand to my mouth. Easy, a familiar voice whispered. It's me. Aldo, Damon's second in command. I hadn't seen him since the ambush in Florence. He looked older, harder, as if the betrayal had carved fresh lines into his face. I came to get Damon out, he said. Do you know where he is? Palace dungeons, West Wing. High security, but I've cracked worse. I nodded slowly. I need him free, but I also need the council on my side. If I vanish, I lose everything. She'll smear me. Aldo's gaze darkened. Then we divide. I'll handle the cell. You handle the crown. I squeezed his hand. Thank you. You saved Damon. I'm just returning the favor. He slipped away like a shadow. I turned and pushed through the chapel doors. Inside were 7 members of the council, seated in cold stone pews beneath stained glass saints. Lord Bexley, Lady Morwen, Duke Eilon, and others. All watching me. I stepped into the light. No cloak, no fear. My name is Amber Courte, I said clearly, daughter of King Lucian and Queen Celeste, and I am here to claim what is rightfully mine. Gasps. Mutters. Lady Morwen narrowed her eyes. You have proof? I walked down the aisle and handed them the documents, my voice steady, my spine unbending. You sat silent when my father died under mysterious circumstances. You sat silent as Catherine twisted this kingdom into her playground. You will not sit silent as she murders again. Duke Eilon glanced up. You accuse her of treason? I accuse her of regicide, of murder, of fraud, and of attempting to imprison the man I love to cover her tracks. Lord Bexley raised an eyebrow. You love him? Yes, I said without hesitation. And I would burn this entire palace to the ground to see him free. Silence. Then a slow clap echoed from the far end of the chapel. Catherine, clad in gold, serene, surrounded by guards. Well, she said, voice dripping with amusement. That was quite the speech, darling. Shame it's your last. The guards raised their weapons. Then, boom! An explosion rocked the floor beneath us. Smoke burst through the western corridor. Aldo, Catherine's face twisted. Amber's eyes locked with hers. No more hiding, I said. I ran for the back doors as chaos erupted around us. Behind me, I heard her scream, Get her! But I didn't stop. Because queens don't run. They rise.
Chapter 13. Chains break too loudly. The cell was damp and reeked of rot. Stone walls, no windows, and a single bulb that flickered like it was on the verge of death. Fitting. I counted the cracks in the ceiling for the 7th time, my hands raw from the cuffs they'd clamped too tightly. Catherine hadn't wasted time. The second I was thrown in here, they'd stripped me of my name, my phone, my allies. But not my will. Amber's face hadn't left my mind once. The way she looked at me as the guards dragged me away, like a wildfire too furious to burn out. She wouldn't kneel, not even to a queen in power. I smiled bitterly to myself. She was the strongest thing in this kingdom, and they had no idea, but they would. Soon. Just then, the lock clicked. I stood, tense, ready. The door creaked open, and Aldo stepped inside, dressed in a guard's uniform, keys in hand. Took you long enough, I growled. He gave me a crooked smile. Miss me, boss? Only when I was thinking of punching someone. He crossed the room fast, unlocking the cuffs. They wanted to move you tomorrow. Public hearing. Let you rot in front of the whole court. Where's Amber? Alive, for now. She's gathering the council. Marcello is helping her. I nodded, flexing my wrists. Then we move. Fast. But as we turned to leave, Aldo hesitated. There's something else. A trap. My blood ran cold. She's using Rose. What? She's announced an emergency royal wedding. To you. I blinked. She what? They're calling it your atonement for betraying the royal family. The country thinks you're marrying Rose tomorrow morning. Public vows. Sealed in blood. Sealed in hell, I muttered. She knows Amber's making a move, so she's trying to reclaim power in the eyes of the people. Exactly. If you show up at that altar, Amber's claim will be branded treason. If you don't, she'll be declared a rogue heir trying to usurp the throne. My fists clenched. Where is this happening? In the cathedral. Catherine's calling it the Day of Restoration. It'll be broadcast to the whole damn continent. I paced the small space, mind racing. Then I'll go. Aldo's brows lifted. You what? I'll go, I said again. But I won't marry Rose. I'll expose Catherine, in front of everyone. Live. Aldo shook his head. That's suicide. Not if I have Amber by my side. You think she'll make it? I looked him in the eye. She's made it through worse. And when she walks through those cathedral doors, I want every camera in the world watching her. He hesitated, then smiled. All right, boss, let's raise hell. The next morning, the cathedral loomed like a crown of stone, tall, beautiful, merciless. They dressed me in gold and black, just as Catherine ordered. Not a single guard looked me in the eye. The pews were filled with nobles, cameras, and politicians, the world watching. Rose stood at the altar in a gown that sparkled like betrayal. Her lips curled in satisfaction as I was led down the aisle. I didn't look at her. I scanned the room for her. Where was Amber? Catherine stood near the archbishop, draped in blood-red silk. She smiled, eyes glittering with victory. Smile for the cameras, Damon, she whispered as I passed. I will, I said, when your crown falls. I took my place beside Rose. The archbishop began the rites. My heart thundered. I was about to refuse, about to damn myself and this country to chaos. And then the doors slammed open. Gasps rippled through the cathedral. Amber strode in, cloaked in deep emerald velvet, a sword strapped to her back and a scroll in her hand. Her voice rang out like judgment. I invoke the law of blood and birth. Catherine's face paled. The archbishop froze. Amber continued, striding down the aisle. I am the daughter of King Lucian and Queen Celeste, and this ceremony is a farce. Arrest her, Catherine screamed. But before the guards could move, half the council stood. Lord Bexley, Lady Morwen, Duke Ilan. She has right of speech, Bexley said coldly. You will listen. Amber reached me, eyes locked to mine. The archbishop looked between us, trembling. What is the meaning of this? She is the rightful heir, I said, turning to face the cameras. This is your queen. Catherine shrieked. Lies, Amber raised the scroll. Proof, documents, testimonies, and the final will of King Lucian recovered last night. The room exploded. Catherine lunged, and that's when the blade came out. But it wasn't Amber's, it was Rose's. She reached beneath her skirt and pulled a dagger, charging for Amber. No! I caught Rose mid-swing, slamming her to the ground. Gasps turned to screams. Guards rushed in. I wrapped my arms around Amber and whispered, You came. I always would. Catherine was dragged away, kicking and screaming. The crown rolled across the floor. Fallen. Amber bent, picked it up with trembling hands. She turned to me, breathless. Do you still want a queen? I smiled, my voice a low growl. No, I want you.
Chapter 14. The Weight of the Crown. The grand hall was silent, but for the echo of my footsteps on the marble floor. Light filtered through the stained glass, scattering shards of color across the room like scattered memories, some bright, some broken. I held the crown in my hands, its cold weight heavier than any burden I had ever known. It was more than a symbol. It was a promise, a chain, a flame. Damon's eyes found mine across the room, burning with a yearning so fierce it made my heart ache and pulse like a drum in a war march. I stepped toward him, the crowd blurring at the edges of my vision. This crown, I said softly, voice steady but trembling inside, belongs to those who fight for what's right, for truth, for love. He reached for my hand, the heat of his skin igniting every nerve ending. Then fight with me, he whispered, pulling me close, and love with me, no matter what the world says. His lips brushed mine, tentative at first, then deepening, hungry and raw, like we were stealing moments before the world demanded everything back. I melted into him, the past, the pain, the poison, the lies, falling away in the fire of this moment. But as our breath mingled, a quiet voice echoed in my mind, the echoes of my father's wisdom, the ghosts of all I had lost. A queen's crown did not just bind her to a throne, it bound her to a legacy. I pulled back, eyes searching his. Damon, if we survive this, if we survive them, promise me one thing. Anything. That we build a kingdom where love isn't forbidden, where no one has to hide or suffer. He smiled, that crooked, imperfect smile that had undone me from the start. I promise. Behind us, the hall filled with whispers, the beginning of a new chapter, of hope. But the war was far from over, because crowns can break, but so can chains, and we were ready to shatter both. The end. Thank you for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe if you would love to read one more chapter that keeps you in the loop.